Hello and welcome to CTOs at Work podcast series. In this podcast series, we talk to chief technology officers, engineering head, product and technology leaders from all around the world and learn from them how they work, how they build and manage world-class technologies and products, how they hire great talent, and many more things. I'm your host, Love Chopra, and in today's podcast, I'm very excited to introduce you to our guest who is from Finland and building technology for world's largest social learning community, and he is Sergey Gerasimenko. Sergey is currently playing his role as VP Engineering at Brainly. Brainly is world's largest social learning community for middle school, high school and college students, as well as for teachers, parents and other educators. Brainly is a free Q&A website which is customized for each country of operations, and Brainly goal is to inspire students to learn within a collaborative environment and expand their knowledge by focusing primarily on homework help. Brainly users come from over 35 different countries, and the total monthly active users are more than 100 million, and over 100,000 questions are being answered daily. This presents a unique engineering challenge which Sergey and his team take care of. Sergey is expert in scaling technology and building great products. Sergey has managed the whole life cycle of innovation from ideation to commercialization to implementation, and he built and managed product and engineering team in various cutting-edge technologies. Sergey has done his MSc Computer Science in Mobile Computing Services and Security from Aalto University. So with that note, I would like to welcome Sergey. So welcome Sergey, it's a great honor to have you on the show.
Hi Love, thanks a lot, and it's an honor for me to be here as well.
Thanks a lot, it's a privilege is ours to have you on the show. Sergey, I was going through your profile and realized you had a wonderful career journey. Like you worked with Nokia initially in various engineering and project management roles, and turned into social entrepreneur, and then headed the product Aalto and to Brainly. Could you please tell us about your career journey so far, like how you climbed your career ladder and reached to this stage and become VP Engineering at Brainly?
Sure, yeah, the road was definitely long and I guess a little bit unusual, so maybe I'll start from the very beginning. I grew up and was raised in Taganrog. It's a quite small city in the south of Russia. And I was really into video games when I was growing up, so I got my first computer when I was 10 and was tweaking it, upgrading it. Like, you know, those days you had like 4 megabytes of RAM, and in order to play a video game you needed to have like 8, so you had to disassemble it, install the new model. So you got really hooked up into all this hardware related things, and that's why I decided to actually pursue career of a computer engineer. So I got into the bachelor program into Taganrog State University of Radio Engineering, and was working on my bachelor thesis over there. But then after 4 years, I was actually supposed to design computer chips, so that was my initial specialization. So after 4 years, I started to think that right now, when I know how computers really operate on the base level, maybe I actually need to study a little bit some high-level stuff. So I was really interested in how internet works, what kind of security protocols we have over there. So I decided to take a master degree. And in Finland, we had a perfect program in mobile computing services and security. So I applied, they accepted, and that's how I left home. That was roughly 11 years ago. So I came to Helsinki, and then at some point of time started to work on a master thesis. And master thesis was focusing on a tunneling. So I was building a special protocol based on open source software in order to have a secure connection between two peers. We can think about it as a custom VPN. And I got, like, honestly speaking, very lucky, because about the same time guys at Nokia were doing a research project about home automation. That was also 10 years ago. And the idea of the project was almost identical for what Apple is doing right now with the HomeKit. They were thinking of creating a centralized hub which could use, let's say, a home router in order to route all the messaging and all communications through, and they needed someone to help them to design this remote connection protocol. So I joined the team, and then we started to grow quite a lot. I think in 1.5 years we grew. When I joined, we were like 5-6 people, and then after that it grew almost to 60 people. We were doing a lot of integration with various vendors. So the solution was focusing that, for example, you can come home and open the door from a mobile phone, or like while you're away, you could change the thermostats and configure the temperature, or check did you leave the windows open and how everything is happening at home.
So this is 10 years back.
Yeah, this is 10 years back.
Wow.
That's the amazing thing about Nokia. There were so much innovations that's done as a part of R&D that is right now like some of the companies restarting again. That you know, you really wonder that technology actually comes and goes in the cycles. So I spent there almost 2 years. I became a Scrum Master because we needed to grow. Then I got the position of a team lead. Somehow, you know, I cannot really say that I actually wanted to become the team lead, but somebody had to, and that was pretty much my my step into, let's call it, management. In a couple of years, the guys who were running this project, they decided to spin it off as a startup. So they got funding also from Nokia Ventures. These guys at Nokia, they thought that this is way too side business for mobile telecom. So they started as a startup, but it was 2008, and in 2008, you know, Nokia was very cool, and startups were totally not cool. So I thought that staying up in a large corporation would be like much more interesting for me. So I started to see what's next, and still as I was working over there, as I mentioned, everything was based on the open source. I started to get to know people in Nokia who were working on also very interesting project, and that was the first internet tablet. That's another very interesting piece of the history. The first internet tablet is actually not iPad, but Nokia N770.
Wow, and this is interesting.
Yeah, so it was just released on the very small market, and Nokia didn't do almost any marketing whatsoever. It was basically, again, one of those R&D projects. So it was relatively large. You know, you can think of like 2 iPhones stuck together, something with a very big screen, and they didn't really want to do it with Symbian. That was the then dominating mobile operating system for Nokia. They wanted to do it with Linux. So the guys started to tweak around, and they released this tablet. And then when I was started to look for the new position, they actually were thinking of the next step. They wanted to introduce a phone which would be based on exactly the same operating system, and they needed someone to take one of the projects. So I thought that this is absolutely incredible opportunity, so I joined the team, and for the first half a year I was helping them to build an office viewer for N900. Then I switched on working on the MMS protocol for the next phone, which was N9. We did a lot of open source contributions over there. Actually, majority of the kernel modifications that, for example, Android right now has, and basically Linux kernel itself, that was our team working very hard to make sure desktop operating system can be very well suited for very low power consumption.
Great.
So that was an incredible journey. It took, I think, like almost 3 years. We launched N900, we launched N9, but that time I was a very big believer in open source software. So when Nokia Microsoft partnership came into place, we just thought that this is just not the really right place for us to stay. So with some of the guys that we've been working with, we decided to leave and start the first startup. So we created a platform for seniors and their family to use modern technology. You know, we were so invested in the mobile phones that we couldn't really think of anything else that wouldn't be connected with the mobile. So basically, what we wanted to do there is to have a mobile phone for grandpa, something very, very simple, but still would allow seniors to use all the modern technology, really, really good camera, to have a private network for the pictures that they could share with the family, and also a remote configuration application that, if, for example, you would need help somehow to your grandparents, you don't have to go and fix it on the phone, you can do it remotely. So we called it Live Solutions, and it got quite a bit of traction, but we, since we were all engineers at that point of time, we really had a big problem with monetizing it. So we decided that it's probably not the best idea to pursue long term. And then the second
I was also actually watching your promotional video that the grandpa is sitting in the park and the daughter is actually coming to pick her. I mean, the concept you represented on that video in a very amazing manner, and I would advise my audience to please watch that.
Yeah, that was actually very, very, very good concept, but the biggest problem, honestly speaking, that we met over there is not even the technological stack, because we were just wanted to use a regular Android phones and have a different application launcher over there that just oversees everything. Not even the remote configuration tools, because we could use Heroku, and like already then it was 2011, 2012. There were really, really lots of tools available that didn't require you to build the entire infrastructure. But the biggest problem was there is sales channel, because we were targeting senior people, and you cannot go to Engadget on TechCrunch and publish a story over there and get the users. It's just basically not that kind of demographic. So we we had to go through mobile operators and convince them to try to have our application installed in the shops where people actually come to see the mobile phones. So we actually had several partnerships in Finland, but it was always taking really, really, really long time. And again, in order to really scale, because Finland is a very, very small country, we just thought that we don't have that kind of a muscle, to go to Vodafone and convince them that our applications actually can help really, really, really a lot of people. So one learning that I made out of this whole experience is that sometimes it's very, very important to understand when you need to stop pursuing some particular idea. So if you start something, you always have to have some particular criteria that like you try this amount of time, and if you don't reach this particular goal, then just means that you have to move on and you have to do something else.
Absolutely, and I think this is a great learning you share. And I saw that is also in India, like lot many startups, they are working from quite longer time, and they in fact not able to realize that out of their inside passion, that this is the time to actually leave and move on to do something. So understanding of the self and reflection of your own startups and technology is also very important. Thank you for sharing that learning.
Yeah, so we luckily had few ideas when we've been still working on this, the first startup, and the second idea was that we had quite a lot of friends and family members who were teachers or like educators of some sort, so we started to think that probably we can help them out as well. And there were two very, very interesting pieces. First of all is that myself, for example, in Russia, all education is provided completely for free. The same thing for Finland and most of the Scandinavia. And we thought that this is something that we really, really should focus, that access to education should be really provided for free for anyone. And the way to achieve it is to actually do it through internet, not through the regular classroom. And the second thing is that when we started to look at the market of what kind of tools that we had over there, we noticed that there are a couple of companies, and they are really, really big ones. One is the Blackboard, for example, which is a huge international company, and they basically specialize in very, very custom learning management systems for the schools. And another one was Moodle, which was also really, really big, open source.
Right.
But there were, like when we started to look at this look at the market, they were I think 11, 12 years old, and they were not exactly very modern. So they still really look like the software design in early 2000s. It was still like everything in PHP, almost no JavaScript, pages like render one by one, very, very slow, unoptimized, and the usability was really, really lacking. So what we thought is that we really have to start a new project that would create a really, really simple way for anyone to create an online course and deliver it for free. So that was also pre-Coursera era. It was, I think we started 1.5 or 2 years before this massive online open courses got really, really popular, and that was our passion. So we really thought of doing it not as a regular business. We really wanted to start it as a social entrepreneurship project. So it took us roughly a year. We picked up a lot of open source components, just tweaked them together, and after 3 years, I think, of operations of Iliademy, we reached quite a lot. I think it became a very popular tool for I think over 1,000 of NGOs, and there were roughly 25,000 of online courses, at least from what I remember a couple of years back. And we did, of course, really lots of things very well. We of course made a lot of mistakes. That was also one of the projects where we all literally had to do absolutely everything, because it was, again, a bunch of engineers trying to figure out how to make a scalable platform that also works as a self-sufficient business, because we really didn't want to take that much of an investment. So that ran really well, and I had to wear really lots of hats. I had to become a product owner, I had to become an engineer, I had to do customer support, so basically everything in order to get the job done.
Awesome.
And roughly 1.5 years ago, I think I spent at Iliademy almost 4 years, I just really started to feel that I learned as much as I possibly can, and that's probably another valuable advice that I can share, is that you always need to take a look at your learning, your trajectory, and what you can achieve in any particular place. So for me, it just felt that we managed to build a stable platform. Everything was working absolutely fine, and it was just like the way to grow was just focusing more and more on the business aspect or on the outreach to the users, but not really on solving any technological problems over there. So I started to look of what would be the next thing, and somehow I just luckily got a call from one of the guys from Naspers. Naspers is one of the investors in Brainly, and they pitched me an idea of really large learning community at a huge scale, and I thought that this is a very interesting thing, and I should go and at least talk with these guys. And honestly speaking, I got swayed completely after I met the team. So leaving Iliademy and joining Brainly was is really fantastic engineering team. They're absolutely brilliant in the platform that they manage develop, and also the scale and future potential that we actually have. So when I joined, we were 80 million monthly users. Right now we are a little bit over 100, and in a few years we have a target of reaching probably 500 million. So that would be already something like 8-9% of the population, which is of course something extremely challenging, but at the same time extremely aspirational.
Absolutely right. And Sergey, you also run Nordic Founders, so could you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is another side project, let's call it this way, or a hobby that I started. So what I realized with engineering education is that when you start a first startup and you don't really get that much of a help, I mean, you don't really have a CTO, you don't have a CFO, you don't have a CEO, you don't have people to help you out with the paperwork, with some administrative things. You just need to figure out most of these things on yourself. And again, luckily Finland is extremely simple and transparent country. All the paperwork is very well documented, everything is available online, but still there are some certain regulations that you have to comply with. And basically I had to learn it in the hard way. So what I thought is that a couple of years after running Iliademy, I probably should share all this information with the fellow entrepreneurs. So I started a meetup group for anyone interested in practical aspects of running a business. So not really into growth hacking or any of this Silicon Valley way of let's start a startup and let's all be the rock stars, but really this day-to-day operational things, how to have a proper cash flow, how to make sure that the tax is paid on time, how to make sure that you actually follow corporate act that define some certain actions and the procedures that the company needs to be doing. And this is something that I've been doing for a couple of years, I think. We also had a bunch of guest speakers over there, and this grew into community, I think over 500 members right now. And I hope to think that this helped somehow some other people who were not 100% sure, do they have to start their own startup, do they really know how everything will operate or not.
Great, this is fantastic. So Sergey, like you handling Brainly in such a massive, huge scale, so what exactly you do as a VP engineering at Brainly, or I mean what's your day-to-day or hourly schedule looks like?
So honestly speaking, like if I would just if I need to define my job in one sentence, I would just say that my job is to make sure everyone in engineering organization is successful and then fix any problems or any issues that getting in the way of the success. But this is way generic, so probably I'll need to go into a little bit more details. So if I think of the role of the VP of engineering, we probably would need to think in general of how the roles in this organization would need to be structured. So usually CTOs of any organizations are very technology oriented. So they're interested in technological stack, they're interested in architecture, they're interested in how exactly they're going to be doing R&D, how they're going to adopt all the new technologies. Then we have project managers or program managers, and those people are usually focused on process. So they're interested in the deliverables, they're interested in getting everything within a certain time frame, within a budget, and just making sure that everything happens according to some particular plan. So how I see this VP of engineering role is actually something in between. It's a combination of the both things. So I really have to keep an eye and be the technical leader of organization. So I'm responsible for developing our technical strategy, but I don't do it alone. I do it together with my team leads. I'm responsible also at the same time on the deliverable of all of our product activities. So I'm also doing a little bit of the project and the program management, just depending on a particular area and the particular project that we are working on. And then of course it all comes up with quite a lot of personnel management, and this is something probably that takes the biggest part of my day-to-day operation. We have an engineering team of 25 people, and we are trying to keep it extremely flat. So I'm trying to have a conversation with every single person over there and make sure that they're feeling great, they're feeling motivated, they know exactly how to do their job, and there are absolutely no obstacles or problems that they face in their daily life.
Great, and thanks for sharing that. So you manage a team of 25 people, 25 engineers. So how
Yep.
do you manage that? Do you follow some set of processes, or do you have developed your own set of processes?
To answer that, probably we would have to go and have a bit longer discussion about general organizational culture. I've been through really lots of various setups. So in Nokia, we were creating at a really, really large scale. So there was a certain process. Everything was more or less organized. You had a very little freedom. Then we had in Iliadem and Livleaf, we were really, really small team with like 5 to 10 people usually, where everyone had to wear multiple hats at exactly the same time. And what I noticed in both those setups is that you usually end up with pretty much exactly the same set of problems, and those set of problems are chronic multitasking. So if people are constantly doing multiple things and they're switching between of them, they lose really, really lots of time, because your focus constantly shifting, and you start at some point of time really feel wear out. Then there is another issue of the shared responsibility, and this is something that is very, very problematic, especially when you go into larger organizations, when you're working on a certain project and it's not clear who is actually responsible for it. Then if one team or one person works on multiple projects, I mean, it's not only multitasking, but you also get with the problem of maintenance long term, because if one person jumped into another project and started working over there, then who is going to be making sure that the company that was delivered before is actually working absolutely fine? It's functional, it doesn't have errors, doesn't have any improvements that needs to be done. And like all of this is also causing another very, very, very big problem, which is technical roadblocks that are being discovered not in advance, but usually afterwards. So you deploy something, it runs there, and then you figure out like, oops, you cannot scale it further because we just didn't really think about like how it's going to work in 2 years. When we talk about how the things are working in Brainly, when I joined, we started to think like how we can actually restructure it and try to make sure that these 25 engineers that we have, they are the most productive team that we can possibly have. And I was a really, really big fan of Daniel Pink's book. It's called Drive. I think it was written probably 10 years ago, and he was studying there several motivation techniques, and in general how motivation was evolving from the age of industrialization, where you have this like very, very clear incentive reward situation, where, for example, if you work more hours in the factory, you get some particular bonus. So how it then evolved during middle of the last century, and then evolved into something which he called motivation 3.0. And there he identified 3 main parameters that actually make any team extremely, extremely motivated. So those are autonomy. So everyone who is working on something, they have full responsibility and ownership of the task that they're doing at any given of time. Then there is mastery, which means that when you're working on something, you are allowed to fail, you're allowed to make mistakes, as long as you learn something in the process. And the third one is a sense of purpose. And this is probably the most important thing right now, I would say, in any engineering organization. You have to know that what you're doing has a bigger meaning than just writing the code. You have to make sure that the work that you do is meaningful, it impacts really lots of other people, it's really, really making a difference. So then how we work in Brainly specifically, like the key takeaways right now, if I wouldn't go into much of the details, is that we always try to form full stack autonomous teams. So when we're working on a particular project, we try to establish a group of people who will take the full responsibility over this particular project delivery or a new product functionality. And with this one comes another idea, is that each team has a mission, and this mission is translated into a set of other tools. So we're using KPIs and OKRs at Brainly. OKRs is this methodology, I think, defined by Intel and then really popularized by Google. And the idea over there is that for each particular initiative, you need to set a very clear objective and extremely clear measurable key results. So for example, if we have a team working on the delivery of some product functionality, we define that the objective is to achieve, for example, higher engagement from the users by introducing a set of new features. And then the key results would be like implement this feature, have a particular user retention, and then measure it and know how exactly it works. So from the practical perspective is that every time team meets, and this usually happens on the weekly basis, we try to look at those objectives and key results and see what we're doing right now. Does it actually help us to achieve these objectives, or right now we're just deviating and start fixing issues with no connection to the actual mission that we have? The third one is we try to make sure that the team actually owns the delivery of a particular components forever. And this not always, of course, works very well, but this is just the idea that we really would like to go with, is that if someone implemented and deployed some particular microservice, then the same team always owns the maintenance and keep working on this on these deliverables through the life cycle of a particular component. And the last, probably the most important part, is that we don't really believe in the project management in its classical form, and instead we have product owners. So the product owner in the Brainly context is partly project manager, partly designer, partly of course a product person, and sometimes even a Scrum Master. So from the technical setup, we have the product owners, and then we have a team. And so far, it works really great.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And I also do believe that in today's time, basically, the sense of purpose is the most important motivation that we can actually transfer into the team. So, yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah, it's extremely important, but we also extremely lucky at Brainly because we have so much of these users that are coming into our platform every day that connecting the work that you do with the mission of Brainly is extremely easy on this very high level strategic picture. So here we're extremely lucky in this regard. And then of course when it comes to this particular individual work that you are doing, the only difficult part over there is to draw this correct line over there, to make sure that, for example, if you work on some infrastructure related thing that doesn't really touch the user experience, it's still extremely important for the users overall, because it makes, for example, website performance higher. It makes the page load faster, so the users are feeling much more satisfied and happy about the whole experience with Brainly. So that's at least our idea of the sense of purpose.
Great, thank you. Sergey, as Brainly users are coming from 35 different countries, from different education levels and backgrounds, and it required Brainly to up and running 24/7. So how you make sure that the platform is up and running round the clock, and what's your technology stack looks like?
So maybe I'll start from a technology stack. Brainly is 7 years old company, and it started like very organically growing from first Poland, then it grew to Russia, then it started to expand into another country. So of course it started as a typical monolith application. It was a PHP code which was basically deployed on each of the market individually. And then of course as the time passed and as we started to see that there are more and more users coming in, this monolith applications just simply didn't really serve the needs. We really started to have quite a lot of the bottlenecks. So about 2.5 years ago, the decision was taken to start moving into microservices infrastructure. And right now, let's just say we are somewhere halfway through this journey. It's going to take probably another couple of years to complete it. So what we do right now is that whenever we develop a new functionality, we try to make it as a microservice. And of course, we had to take out from the monolith code all the major subsystems that we have. But for example, some functionalities and product features that are 2-3 years old and not used very much, they still stay in the monolith. So from general architectural model, I would just say that we still follow this usual 3-tier setup, where you have an application layer, you have a business logic, and then you have a data storage. And microservices in this case fit in perfectly, with only one addition, is that we have a centralized messaging system, so communication of all the microservices go to a central place. Then from the technology and the languages that we use, we try to experiment with multiple languages before, and right now, roughly a year ago, we just decided that we're going to be using Python and Go. So the decision comes in from a performance consideration. So if this is a task that needs to be highly scalable, then we try to write it in Go. If this is something that just needs to do some machine learning or operate with some data and do some manipulations, then this is Python. And the decision to stick with 2 languages only was mostly dictated by our size. So we just didn't really feel comfortable that we're only 25 people, and then let's just say someone goes and starts writing things in Haskell, and another person starts writing things in I don't know, C++ even, or basically anything goes for the microservices infrastructure. We had a problem with making sure that someone can maintain it, because if there is only one person knows Haskell, it means that basically we have a bottleneck. And the moment this person, for example, gets sick, we have a problem of maintaining the microservice. So that's why we limited it into only 2 languages right now that we officially support. Then for the scale, we went to a really big project of migrating from dedicated infrastructure into cloud. So we moved to Amazon we started, let's just say, in the December of the last year, and then by January, February, we actually completed the migration. So right now, we have several dedicated markets which are served completely individually from their own isolated structures, and without going that much into the details, we use most of the technologies that Amazon provides. We use, of course, elastic load balancers. We use a lot of instances. On average, we are, I think, like 4,000 to 5,000 instances. But the interesting piece over here is that mostly because the Brainly grew from this big monolithic application, right now our approach is to make microservices as small and as replicable as possible. So on average, each microservice that we have, it consumes not more than 100 megabytes of RAM, and this allows us to scale into virtually unlimited amount of users.
Great. And what's your DevOps process looks like at Brainly?
So we have right now a dedicated DevOps team. Long term, of course, we would like to move into the direction where the team actually that develop a set of features also develops and deploys and maintains them. But right now what we have is that we have a continuous delivery and continuous integration system. So on average, I think we do like 20-30 releases per day. And all of this possible right now with a very small team of just 3 people on the DevOps side. So what we want to make sure, and how this responsibilities are split, is that the teams that are working on a particular piece of a delivery They are implementing the code, they cover all unit integration testing, they are also the ones who are actually making a commit, and of course our continuous integration system works in a way that you just need to make a pull request, make sure that it passes various tests, and then it just goes into the pipeline and automatically delivered into all instances all around the world that we have. And the DevOps team in this case, they are focusing on the reliability and the stability of the platform. So we have very, very, very sophisticated in-house, let's call it, system. Again, it's pretty much most of the open source components. So we use Elk Stack, we use Elasticsearch, Kibana, and have also quite several other tools. And then what happens is that we do the deploy, and if all integration tests are passed, then it gets to all the users, and then we start with monitoring. So for example, if some application goes down, we start getting a lot of errors. Then we also have a self-healing infrastructure right now. So for example, if one instance response time, then we have a special threshold that each of the applications have to comply with, and if it goes beyond that, then instance is automatically terminated, and then we restart a new one. And because we use the centralized messaging system, we don't really lose any data from the users. So it all just stays in the queue until the new instance is set up, processes all these requests, and then user operation is completed.
Great. Thanks a lot for sharing this in so much of detail. So, Sergey, do you still code? So I'm asking out of curiosity.
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I just don't really have that much time to do this as I had before. So right now, if I do some pull requests, they are mostly front-end related. So this is just something that usually connects with some very, very quick changes or some requirements that our marketing team has. Like, for example, hey, we would need to change this particular text, change how the button looks like. So something that can be done in literally just a couple of minutes of coding. But if we stick to our process, would take probably a week, because we are working in sprints and we're trying not to introduce any unnecessary requirements. So in this case, my coding is mostly limited to just some quick fixes that just needs to be done in order to make sure that we can operate as fast as possible.
Great, great. Suppose, Sergey, if somebody wants to build a similar platform like Brainly or like Quora, so what advice you would like to give, and what's your suggestion on choosing a right technology stack? At present point of time, you can understand that technology is moving very far, and you understand what are the kind of challenges you're facing with the use of multiple tools and technology. So what your recommendation would be?
I would say that the most important right now is to make sure that you really well study the offering that cloud providers have, and also study all possible middleware, because this is what fundamentally changed. If, let's just say that you looked at the state of internet 10 years ago, if for example you would needed to make a video application, like let's just say that we would want to make Skype, right? 10, 15 years ago, you are in a really big trouble, because you would have to do pretty much everything. You would have to make sure it's done correctly with the codec, which can operate with any like web camera that is available on a computer, and the algorithm on another when we do this video calling. Then you would need to solve a lot of NAT traversal problems because everyone is under IPv4, so we would need to have some tunneling gateways set up to make sure that it somehow works. Then there is a service discovery. Then there is, of course, some middleware to actually connect into the video camera. So it's very, very simple thing like let's just make a Skype application turns into really, really huge and very, very challenging engineering projects. And right now, if, for example, you would need to build a very, very similar video chatting application, you have almost everything available. You can use WebRTC, which became a standard that's been developing for probably several years. And this event essentially allows any browser to start a video session, and then all encoding of the information, all this NAT traversal is done within the browser, within the protocol. So you just need to call one particular function that just start a video. So when it comes into the infrastructure itself, you don't have to build your own servers anymore. You actually can rent all of them. And Amazon, Microsoft, Google Clouds, all of them, they offer solutions which are based on the open source, which are highly customized for the needs that you have. So for example, Amazon even has their own transcoding framework which you can use to in the DOS. Just actually figuring out how to make that. So right now we like a video application, a video chat application can be created virtually by the team of just 2 or 3 people, and all the infrastructure is just going to be the Amazon, and all of this can be done just within probably a month actually. So the advice that I would have is that from engineering perspective, it's always really fun to try to invent the bicycle, but in the modern world and in the state of the technologies that we have right now, it's very important to really study what is available over there, that instead of just building everything from scratch, even though it's super fun, you try to reuse as much as possible of the components that are already available out there.
Great. And Sergey, as I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you mentioned that Brainly, as you are currently hiring. So what's your currently hiring strategy, and what kind of roles you hiring for?
Mm-hmm.
And how you hire? Do you take multiple rounds of interview? What's your selection process looks like?
We are honestly we are blessed with absolutely incredible HR team. That's probably the best guys, the best HR team that I ever worked with. Including all my experience in Nokia. And when I joined, we already had extremely well-established process over there. So how it works is that there is, of course, push and pull. So there is a regular sourcing where we go through a list of potential people, all the usual tools, Stack Overflow, LinkedIn, job boards, and we try to see what is actually what kind of skills people have, what did they do in past, and then of course there is a pool. We have, for example, an incentive program internally that if someone brings in a person that they know, they get a referral bonus. And then when it comes into this process itself, how we try to make it work is that usually it's 5 or 6 steps over there. Usually someone from the HR team first reach out to the person, explains what the Brainly is, and this is where we have, of course, huge advantage is that telling that the people could be working on helping scale that serves right now 100 million students. It's a very, very, very cool thing, and lots of people get hooked up to this. So this way we get a lot of people who would be interested in our interviews. Then usually I join this process, so I try to talk with the person and see do they fit into our engineering culture. Then we have a couple of more technical interviews. They're very, very short, usually under half an hour, and then this is something that we do relatively different from all my past experience. When we know that the person is fitting us from both culture and the technical knowledge perspective, we invite the person in for an event which we call Demo Day.
Okay.
And then, depending on the role, it can go 2 days. And what happens over there is that it's not really a day where you just go and like have a bunch of interviews in a row. Instead, we ask you to work on a particular task, something that we actually have in the current backlog, but work together with the team. So basically, you become a part of our team for a day or two, and you just work on everything as it would be a regular day. And then, as a result of this one, we try to see whether a person actually fits into the team without just asking some questions like, how do you deal with the stress? We really see how the person behaves when they are together with the guys. And the second thing is that the team actually sees what the person is, what do they know, how they can contribute to the team, what knowledge do they have, how do they behave, and this gives a really good general picture of a person, and basically allows us probably to make a very good hiring decision, which is not really based on personal opinions, but based on this overall feeling of a person actually working together with you. But then there is one very important detail, is that when we do the hiring, we are not really looking for the people with some incredible achievement in past. We always try to hire for the potential and not for some past achievement. So we very frequently try to hire sometimes junior or junior to mid people to help them out, grow, learn something together with us, and become much more proficient. So this is what we believe, at least.
Great. And Sergey, you also have a India-centric product. I saw that Brainly.in. Right?
Yeah.
So do you also specifically, and I saw that it has a huge organic traffic, I mean monthly more than 10 million, more than like 10-12 million traffic it gets. So do you also hiring for that particular product, of India-centric product?
From engineering perspective, we don't really separate the markets, because we have one code base that just gets delivered to every single market that we have. And this is probably the most important decision that we took really long time ago, that we don't want to end up with these branching pieces of software that are really custom and market specific. So instead, we have central code base, and if there are some customizations for any particular market, then they are just done on a deployment stage. But otherwise, it's pretty much exactly the same code. So from the business perspective, I can only say that India is extremely important for us, and we will be reinforcing our positions in India probably in the next year, and there will be more news coming up over there. So when it comes into the hiring, we have right now several backend positions, and probably we'll have more in the beginning of the next year.
Great. Sergey, I would like to ask a lot of questions to you, but as a respect of the time, I would just ask you a final question, and then we will wrap up this session. So finally, I would like to ask, from your personal perspective, like what do you think, like what are the vital skills are required to become a successful CTO, or become a successful VP engineering, or a successful tech leaders in any organization?
That's a very good question. I would say that the most important thing, that not even connected 100% to being a tech leader, I would just say that the most important in any organization, in any role, is to make sure that you treat everyone equally, and remember that you are not a boss but a leader. And as a leader, you always have to focus on a few things, and those things, just from the top of my head, is that you always have to clear the obstacles for the team. If they have some problems, you have to be the person who will go out, figure it out, and help them out to solve it. As a leader, you always have to take the blame. So if something went wrong, do not try to blame the team that you have. Always try to blame yourself, because you are responsible for the deliveries that they actually have. Then try not to dictate any solutions, and instead of this, try to ask smart questions. So the best way to get the team motivation and actually get everyone on board and working toward a particular task is to ask how we can make it in the best way, and then just moderate the discussion into direction that you want it to have. Even if you have a solution in mind, it's always much better to ask an opinions rather than just say that, right now we're doing the things this way. It also helps a lot to explain why we're doing the things in any particular way, instead of just saying like today we're building A, B, and C. And the last thing I would just say is like when it comes to any organization, any technical organization especially, is that you always have to be shipping. So you always have to make sure that the things that the team is doing are being released. If it's internal customers, external customers, it doesn't really matter, but there needs to be a constant feeling of a progress, that the things that teams are working on are being delivered, deployed, launched, and they can take an ownership and pride of doing this work.
Great, thanks a lot for sharing such a great wisdom. So finally, thank you so much for sharing such a great insight, Sergey. And it's really a great honor to have you on our show. And I'm sure whoever is listening to this podcast must have learned some great lessons out of it. And if you guys, whoever is listening it, have any question for Sergey, please feel free to write it to the comment section and we will definitely get back to you. Thank you so much for being with us, and stay tuned for the next podcast. Goodbye and see you soon.